Time to take the pulse rate, I think, after a race like that. I mean, this was, forget masks in the garage area. Toto Wolff, no mask at all. Why would you with that amount of pressure going on, with that going on, all at 30-degree ambient as well? What a race. I said yesterday that it was kind of going to bottle forever, for posterity, everything that it has been the 2021 Formula One World Championship. And so it proved in a number of dimensions. It's very difficult. Everyone's going to say it's very difficult to know where to start with this race, and I guess I've got to join that. But I would say this. I think what we saw today with the way Lewis won that race and the way Mercedes made mistakes and nonetheless still won the race, and the way Max drove, total raw aggression, going for everything, slight underdog in terms of car performance, but brilliantly quick in sector one, taking gambles, running the slightly softer tyre, the medium tyre for the second start, second restart. You know, that kind of sums up the championship, I think, in a way. But what does that mean in itself? I guess it means it is entirely appropriate that both drivers, Lewis and Max, now go into the last race of the season. Next weekend, it's a doubleheader, exactly equal on points. When there are a billion points out there to be won, half points and everything else, fastest laps, and they're equal on points. I mean, that in many ways just says everything you need to say. But I won't ramble on too much about that because we need to get down to the race. And of course, you know, Max blew the pole yesterday with that mistake. And so you would think if you make a mistake like that at the top of the championship, under pressure, then you know, if you've got to finish second or third, that's the result. That is what it is, as everybody likes to say, following Michael Schumacher's great words. But of course, it was never going to be that easy because this is 2021 and this is Hamilton versus Verstappen. So let's talk about that first start. It was a clean start and everything kind of happened as it was going to happen. And we even saw Charles Leclerc defending beautifully. I predicted yesterday that maybe Perez would get the run on the clean side of the grid, but he wasn't that good off the line, but he was trying to go really deep under braking. But Charles stayed there, did a really nice defense. Anyway, that was by the by. At the front, it was Lewis, clean start, Bottas right behind him, and then Max Verstappen behind Bottas. Perfect situation for Lewis, Hamilton and Mercedes, even to the point where Valtteri is starting to have a conversation with his race engineer saying, can you get Lewis to go a little bit quicker so I got a little bit more free air because I don't want to go any faster. I want to keep this pace to keep Max behind Lewis, that is, keep the gap, and let Lewis give me a little bit more air just so I don't overheat anything. I mean, there are that sort of control, and when a team's in that position, it is nirvana really, isn't it? And so you thought, wow, you know, this is going to be a pretty boring race. You're going to go round and round and round. But then on lap 10, when everything seemed to be relatively settled, it all changed. Mick Schumacher spun in the fast S's and hit the wall, just as Charles Leclerc did on Friday. And that brought out a safety car. And Mercedes immediately thought, we'll bring both cars in, which meant doing a stacked pit stop. And in their mind, of course, Valtteri was then going to go as slowly as he could in order to give Lewis enough time to get in, get out, and not to interfere with Lewis's pit stop in any way, in other words. Of course, you can look at that from another point of view, which is the point of view of Max Verstappen, which was that Valtteri then was going much slower than Lewis, and Max got irate on the radio saying, what's going on? He's holding me up. This is ridiculous. And I think Red Bull made the right call then because they could see how much time they were going to lose if they then did bring Max in to keep him out. And I think the reason they chose to do that was because Valtteri had held him up. So you could argue, you know, from Max's point of view, he wasn't happy about that. He didn't think Valtteri should be going that slowly. And then what happened was that they put the red flag out. Both Mercedes had stopped by then, of course, and gone out on a new set of hard tyres, gone from medium to hard. And Max, still on his original set of mediums, came into the pits leading the race and now had a free tyre stop. So it looked like an incredibly well-judged call by Red Bull, to the point where Lewis got on the radio to say, you know, we took a massive gamble coming in, why didn't we stay out? Of course, easy to say that in hindsight because nobody knew at that point that the red flag was going to come out. So at that point, you've got Max Verstappen going from P3 to P1, just like that. You've got Lewis Hamilton going from P1 to P2, and Valtteri Bottas going from second to third. A massive change of the order, particularly now as everybody's going to restart the race, standing start on new sets of hard tyres. So basically Max has been given a free pit stop and he's got the lead. At this point, I have to say, I was thinking there is absolutely no way in the world Lewis Hamilton is going to win this Grand Prix now. Not, just trying to take an objective view of it. I thought this is a win now for Max Verstappen. How is Max going to lose this race? He's on the pole that he thinks he should have got yesterday had he not made that mistake. And there are going to be no more pit stops. They're all going to run the full distance on the hard tyre. Deal done. And then there was a lot of tension in the air because the cars left the pit lane in single file. And it was very clear that you're not allowed to do a practice standing start from the pit lane. And where Lewis sat behind Max, it looked as if Max did a semi-standing start. It wasn't a real standing start, but it certainly wasn't just to pull away from low revs, as Lewis and Valtteri did in the Merc. So Lewis then got on the radio to say, Max has did a practice start from the pit lane, which isn't allowed. And nothing has actually been said or done about that since, as I speak. And it's interesting to know that no action will be taken, I guess, maybe because other things happen in the race thereafter. But I think Lewis had a point there. But nonetheless, Max then had a point because behind the safety car, which was a rather ungainly Aston Martin thing, a sort of SUV Aston Martin, doesn't really look like a really quick safety car. All the drivers started to say, what is going on? Why is this car so slow? And they were right, because we've talked all weekend about how critical tyre temperatures are around this circuit, getting them up to temperature. And at this point, they were all on the hard tyre. So you'd be thinking, they've got a serious point here. And I think from Lewis's perspective, having seen Max do this sort of practice start from the pit lane, which annoyed Lewis, obviously, he then decided to hang back as much as he could in order to have Max sit on the pole for as long as possible to get the temperature out of the tyres. I think that's what was kind of going through his head a little bit. And Max got on the radio to say, what's Lewis doing? He's more than 10 cars lengths behind me. This isn't allowed. He shouldn't be allowed to do it. But I think, as I understand the rules, I think he's wrong there because it's a standing start that he was pulling up to. And I think for a standing start, there's no limitation on what sort of speed you can do and the distance of the car in front. You're doing your own practice starts on the road anyway. Yeah, so that's sort of set the tone now because we've gone from this sort of very settled race order to this thing where Lewis, of course, was annoyed that he had gone from first to third over just like the flick of a finger. And equally, Max was annoyed that he was sitting on the grid for so long on these hard tyres. And sure enough, Lewis made a really good start from the inside on the dirty side of the grid and felt he had the position going into the first corner. And this, I think, sums up the day in many ways. He found himself in front of Max. He moves to the centre of the road. They're both early breakers, remember, moves to the centre of the road. And even then, he tries to brake as late as he can and runs slightly wide going into the corner, a little bit like the French Grand Prix a couple of years ago. Max tries to go around the outside. Lewis is here, and it's one of these, and Lewis backs out of it. Esteban Ocon and Max Verstappen go past, and Esteban even gets a run on Max going into turn 3 at the end of the next bit of straight. So Lewis, I think, at that point is very vulnerable, of course, to be hit. And this is a classic example of what I was just saying, that I think if Max felt that if we do collide here, it's the end of the story for Lewis and not so bad for me. And I think Lewis did a really good job of staying out of trouble there and defending his space, his area. But he was P3 now. But then, of course, another red flag came in. That was because behind there'd been a midfield shunt involving Sergio Perez and Nikita Mazepin in the back of George Russell, who braked suddenly to avoid the Perez incident in front of him, and Charles Leclerc was involved as well. So that brought out the red flag again, and everybody came back into the pits. But it was at this point that the race started to become a lot more than just a motor race, because they're back in the pits now. And Michael MASI gets on to the radio to Red Bull and says, we'd like to make you an offer. We'd like you to restart this, Max to restart this behind Esteban Ocon. Which seemed a bit odd actually at the time, because it was Lewis that obviously he'd got the position from. By going off the track. But it was disputable whether or not he was in avoidance because Lewis is running wide, or whether or not it was a genuine, used a bit of the runoff area to do the overtaking. That was something that the stewards would argue about for quite a long time, I think, with the presence of both sets of team officials. But this offer was made to Max, to Red Bull. So they thought about that for a while. And then he came back and said, oh, no, I made a mistake. Sorry, what I meant was I'll make an offer to you that he has to start behind Lewis. So it'll be Ocon on the pole and Lewis second and Max third. And of course, the offer was there. It sounds a bit odd that all these offers are being made, but the offer was being made because the bottom line was that if Red Bull didn't accept that, he would give the whole thing to the stewards. And then, of course, there could be, I don't know, a time penalty. There could be something else, a stop-go penalty. If they went that way, maybe there'll be nothing at all. But it was a bit of a gamble for them not to accept the Michael MASI offer. So they thought about that and they thought, well, we'll be on the clean side of the grid. And if we put him on medium tyres, there's half a chance that he'll still get the lead before the first corner again, knowing Max and knowing that the medium tyre is that quick. And probably Merc will stay on the hard tyre. And there was another factor here, I think, in Red Bull's thinking, classic Red Bull on the ground, Jonathan Wheatley and the boys. And that is this sort of race, a bit like Singapore, so much going on, that there's half a chance there'd be quite a lot of additional safety cars or even red flags. And being on the medium tyre, even though it wasn't the right tyre for the remaining distance, there was half a chance that potential BSCs and red flags might give that medium tyre a life right through to the end. That, of course, was a gamble, but you'd have also to think that the Red Bull has that advantage through sector one, through the tight corners, and it could be enough, given all those other things, if Max is in front, to win the race, particularly if, in the hot ambience that were there, it was going to be difficult for Lewis to follow the Red Bull that closely in terms of brake and power unit temperatures and all the other systems on the car. So that was a really good move, I think, by Red Bull. And as they went out and Lewis saw that Max was on the medium tyre as he passed him to take his P2 position on the grid, he immediately got on the radio and said, you know, shouldn't we be on the medium tyre? This is classic Lewis, you know, why wouldn't he do that? Why did we stop? Why aren't we on the medium? That's what Max is doing. And to the credit of Mercedes, he said, yeah, but the hard tyre is the correct tyre, Lewis. And here again, you know, we're jumping ahead, but I think the point has to be made that Max's rear tyres on the medium rear tyres did go off quite badly in the last 10 laps of the race, and had nothing else happened other than Lewis just following Max, Lewis probably would have won the race purely on that difference in tyre performance. So it was the right call by Mercedes to put him on the hard tyre. Max was on the medium tyre. Anyway, they came up yet again for another start, again behind the ungainly green Aston Martin thing, very, very slow, annoying all the drivers. And that thought was echoed by Daniel Ricciardo, who got on the radio to say, you know, if there's going to be another restart, can we make sure this safety car, this thing goes a bit quicker, please? And he doesn't actually speak like that, but it's a late night and I'm a bit stressed by all this. But he did really well to finish fifth at the end of the day, Daniel. So a very good day for him, making up ground, as I say, from that thing. He was another guy that didn't stop early on. Max, with the eyes on this time on the medium tyre, sure enough, makes a brilliant start from P3. And as they go into the first corner now, it's Max on the inside, Lewis in the middle, Esteban Ocon on the outside. And Lewis again does a brilliant job, I think, of just backing away from it and not forcing the issue and letting it all happen in front of him, even though he's sacrificing, of course, track position big time. So now it's Max Verstappen in the lead of this Grand Prix. Lewis very quickly repasses Esteban Ocon to get to P2. And now we settled in to a phase of the race, which was Lewis about one and a half seconds behind Max by the end of sector one. And by the time they got to the start-finish line, it would be down to like 0.9 of a second. So in other words, Max always able to open out a gap on sector one, the tighter bit, but then sectors 2 and 3, and of course the all-important DRS section coming onto the pit straight, it was Lewis probably to the tune of about 0.2, 0.3 quicker generally throughout the race. But every time Lewis got to within about 0.6, 0.7, in other words, within DRS range of Max, a virtual safety car came out. And there were 3 virtual safety cars. And here you're thinking, yeah, Red Bull have got this race absolutely spot on, because the medium tyre for sure is going to be in trouble towards the end, as we said. But the virtual safety cars are saving it for them. And they're going to win this race purely because it's such a fragmented Grand Prix. And for me, it all came to a head when the safety car went in, and it was about lap 35. And on that lap, both Max and Lewis did 31.4, identical lap times virtually. And you thought, right, after all this stuff, here we are, these two guys doing exactly the same lap time. What we didn't know, of course, was how much Lewis might still have had in hand and how much Max was beginning to feel the grip going away on the medium tyre. But what we could see in the laps that followed very quickly was that Lewis was able, even if he lost half a second on sector 1, he was very able to gain that sectors 2 and 3 more easily as the race ran towards the checkered flag. Into virtual safety car number 4. It just went on and on. But that was a short one. This was a debris cleaning thing. Fernando Alonso got on the radio at one point and said, we've had 1 million red flags. Why don't they put out a proper safety car now? Because there's so much debris all over the track. But they didn't. They kept it as a virtual safety car. I think to the credit of Michael MASI, I've got to say here, I mean, it's got to be the most difficult job in the world, I would have thought, Michael Massey's job right now, with Mercedes here, Red Bull there, Formula One the way it is. I mean, this guy, I mean, some people may not agree with all his decisions, but I think, I mean, I doff my hat to him because I think he's very calm and very astute under pressure. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. But as they come to the end of that virtual safety car period, Lewis is now within half a second of Max as they come into that last corner. In other words, for the first time, he has a DRS opportunity to pass Max Verstappen. As they come out of the last corner and go down the straight, you're on board with Lewis Hamilton and you see Max starting to move just a little bit and then just stays firmly on the inside of the straightaway, and Lewis gets a beautiful run with DRS, passes him down the outside, and you think, yeah, he's done the pass. But no, this is Max Verstappen, and this is the World Championship at stake. Max, on this occasion, brakes incredibly late, goes down the inside. Lewis is sort of on the outside by now, and there is, I got to say, there is a freeze frame of Max mid-corner, and he's got almost full right lock on the car. Now, he would argue the back end's come out, and I realise I'm in a bit of a moment, I'm going on to the runoff area, but it looks for all the world, if you want to put that interpretation on it, of Max Verstappen is saying, there is no way in the world you're going to pass me, Lewis Hamilton, even if it means if I do that in the middle of a left-hander. And he gets, and Max retains the lead. And as it turned out, that was the incident that coloured the rest of the race, because there was an instruction pretty soon afterwards from MASI for Max to give back the position to Lewis Hamilton, which the implication is that he felt Lewis had got the lead and Lewis was in the lead position. But if he was, it was only for a millisecond, of course, going into that first corner, probably half a car's length. But nonetheless, from the point of view of Michael MASI, it was in front. And then there was a massive amount of confusion, because when MASI got on the radio to Ron Meadows of Mercedes to say Max Verstappen is going to give the position back to Lewis Hamilton, Ron was talking to somebody else and didn't hear that message from Michael MASI, so he didn't let Lewis know. There were a couple of messages to Max Verstappen to saying you've got to give the position back to Lewis, Max, and he didn't seem to hear them. Typical Max, as you can imagine. But then there was this very odd incident where they're coming round the back section of the lap, and Max just suddenly slows, thinking, okay, you can have this position, but slows a lot and then brakes a lot. And Max, what can I say here? I remember I think it was a 70, I'm guessing it was a 78 Long Beach Grand Prix, when Niki Lauda knew that he was out of the race. There was something wrong with the Brabham Alpha, and Carlos Reutemann was right behind him. And rather than put his hand up and go down the escape road, which is what Niki did, he was going to go down the escape road and retire the car. I think the engine had gone. He just braked incredibly late, as if he was going into the corner. And Carlos was kind of completely amazed by it all and had a half spin. And it was, I remember Carlos saying, as good as Niki is, that he was definitely trying to lure me into an error by not giving me any indication of what was going to happen. And I think there was a little bit of that going on today with Max. I think Max was hoping, in a way, that Lewis would run into the back of him. And of course, in that situation, he would just say, well, I was slowing down to let him pass. What do you expect? And that's what happened. And I think from Lewis's point of view, and here, I've got to say, I try to be objective. And I know these days, everything is so polarized that it's almost impossible to be objective, because if you take any position, it's going to upset somebody. But I can only say what I think. And I think from Lewis's point of view, having been behind Max for so long and then had that happen a couple of times at the first corner, he was very wary of Max. He was obviously very wound up too by everything that was going on. And he'd got no instruction to pass Max, or to know that Max was going to let him do that, and to have Max suddenly slow like that. No wonder Lewis was confused, and there was one of these. For Lewis to hit Max, there must have been a really sudden retardation on the Red Bull, because there's no way Lewis Hamilton's judgment is that bad. So, afterwards they both said, well, I don't really know what happened. And I think both of them were being fairly diplomatic, I guess, at the time, because that isn't what they will be saying in the team debriefs for sure. Lewis will be saying, Max brake tested me, which is one of the worst things a driver can do. Ayrton Senna, I've got to say, did that. Martin Brundle knows all about that from Formula 3, and he did it in Formula 1. Nigel Mansell knows about it. And I don't know, did Jacques Villeneuve brake test Ralf Schumacher once? I think he did in Melbourne. But that's another matter. And I think from Max's point of view, it was, I shouldn't have to be doing this. This is very annoying. This is my Grand Prix. I don't agree with this decision. And if I've got to let him pass, I'm just going to suddenly brake. I'll come off the power and then I'll suddenly brake if he doesn't, And I think, it was all a bit childish and messy and not very elegant. But I think, sadly, a lot of people will say, wow, what a situation, what a Grand Prix, what a thing, what a great thing for Formula One. I can hear it all now. And I'm kind of part of that in a way, I guess, because it is a great thing for Formula One when you've got it so mano a mano. But equally, I got to say, I think Lewis, he tried to say it afterwards. I'm not sure it came over as well as he wanted it to, but I think Lewis found a perfect balance between being aggressive, but also being correct. I don't think Lewis did anything incorrect today. And I think Max was on the edge a couple of times of being incorrect. Having said that, no, I've got to correct myself slightly. I think when Max eventually did slow down, when he didn't need to actually, because he was then given a 5-second penalty. And by then all Lewis had to do was finish within 5 seconds of Max, which he was going to do, even with the broken front wing end plate, right front wing end plate from the shunt with Max. But Max, when he got the news of the penalty, also let Lewis pass very easily. Red Bull got back and said, we didn't actually need to do that, Max. But, anyway, his rear tyres had gone off by then anyway. But when he did that, going into that last corner, Lewis did one of these. He went down the inside of Max and then just really ran him wide off the track, I think, almost over the white line anyway. And that was on the edge. And MASI correctly got on the radio to Mercedes and said that was absolutely on the edge of what is acceptable. But in a way, that is Lewis Hamilton. It was absolutely on the edge of what is acceptable. It wasn't by any means Jackie Stewart, perfect ethical principles, but it was, this was Lewis very, very angry, obviously, at everything that had happened, particularly in his mind, the brake testing. And that's what he did, just ran him a bit wide. But there was a lot of runoff area there. It wasn't a dangerous running wide thing. And then with the damaged front wing end plate, Lewis then set fastest lap, which was an amazing bit of driving, really. Or it doesn't say much about Mercedes aerodynamics, one of the two. I guess it's probably the former. The ups and downs of this race, of what we saw going on in the garages, the anguish, the jubilation, the mechanics with the fist pumps and all a bit over aggressive actually, I thought. All to the backdrop of the race starting in memory of Sir Frank Williams, which was lovely. A beautiful lap driven by Damon Hill in the Williams FW07 Cosworth DFE. The engine note just said it all throughout the lap, and it was brilliant how international TV just followed that entire lap of Damon driving that car. And if you think about the way Frank ran his team, when he had incredible battles going on between Nigel and Keke and Nigel and Nelson Piquet and Damon and Jacques and other pairings as well. When you think about the class of that, and then what we saw today, it was slightly different world, isn't it? Different world. But it was good to see. It was nice to see that world of Frank just before the start of the race. So Lewis won it. Lewis won it. And I think he'll be, as he crossed the line, I think he thought, what was that? And he said, he made a point of saying, all the stuff I've learned as a racing driver, all the track craft I've learned came into play today. And I think that's right, because a lot of it is not only aggression, it's how not to get involved in what is going on around you. And I've always felt the most difficult position to be in is when the guy next to you has not got as much to lose as you in terms of the championship, but you've got to be aggressive to overtake him. It's a really, really difficult thing. Nicky did that very well against Prost in '84. And I think Lewis drove a really, really good race today because it's so difficult to stay out of trouble when there's so much trouble going on around you. And I give him 100% for that. And I give Max, 100% for being the racing driver that he is, and for Red Bull being the racing team that it is, putting him on the medium tyre. I think all that stuff after the race about, I don't know why Lewis ran into the back of you, Max. I mean, that was just there for the benefit of, let's try to make sure there are no penalties issued out here, because, that was a bit fatuous to say that, to be honest. I think it was Christian that said that. But I think it was, it was a race that will be remembered as, wow, did you see that? Equally, it was a race with a lot of stuff that wasn't of the greatest standard of driving by the Jackie Stewart book of ethics. And is that a good thing? I don't know. It's 2021. It's the world of social media. It's the world of Netflix. It's the world of let's make it happen. I suppose it is, as I've said before. I suppose you've got to live with that. So, I don't know, what's my abiding memory of this race? I think that's the way to end this video. Actually, you know what it is? It's Adrian Newey on the grid of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix with all this tension, with all this stuff going on before the real start, the first start. And he's there with his clipboard and notebook, and he's writing notes, looking at the other cars, notes in his own mind that he doesn't want to... Making notes, not doing it on an iPhone or whatever, in an old style notebook, working hard, probably thinking about the 2022 car, I imagine, or maybe not, maybe thinking about something they need to do for Abu Dhabi. And I just thought, just that Adrian Newey looking at this notebook, making these notes with a pen, P-E-N, remember those things? Doing all that amidst all this stuff going on around him, the fireworks, the music, everything else. I just thought, yeah, there's a reason that Red Bull is such a good racing car. Red Bull Honda is such a good racing car. Anyway, they finished first and second today. Now they're equal on points, and they're going to Abu Dhabi next weekend for the final face-off. Lewis has won 3 in a row now. Can he make it 4, or can Max Verstappen win his first World Drivers' Championship? See you very soon.